The situation in Shanghai is going from bad to worse. It has been over 2 years since the world was first introduced to the COVID-19 pandemic. It started in China's Wuhan city and slowly spread to the rest of the world. During this time, we have seen a shift from the initial zero-tolerance approach, lockdowns, to accepting a life with the virus, a gradual return to normalcy. But for the Chinese, the original center of the coronavirus, not much has changed in these months. Beijing is still continuing with its draconian COVID containment measures, a policy that is very evidently backfiring in its financial capital, Shanghai, triggering public anger, frustration, and distress. Shanghai, the financial capital of China, has become the latest epicenter of the COVID-19 pandemic for the Asian nation. In the last few weeks, nearly 25 million people of its residents have been put under complete lockdown. Businesses have been declared closed. There is a shortage in food, medicine, water, and essential supplies. And if the situation was not troubling enough, the authorities are now using force to make sure that people follow the extreme rules. The video on your screen is from the Pudong district. Dressed in hazmat suits, Chinese officials can be seen scuffling with the residents. A few seconds into video, you can see a man being dragged by the authorities, a woman crying, kneeling on the ground. Cries of letting the elderly be. The video was posted on Chinese social media. The user who put it said that the local government requisitioned several residential buildings in the city or in the county, which will now be turned into isolation centers as infection figures continue to climb. Another user said that at first only empty residential complexes were used as isolation centers. But with spike in COVID cases, they are forcing people out of their rented apartments.
All of us here are residents who abide by the law. We are willing to do something for the country. You forbade us from gathering or to head out anywhere outside, and we have complied. But now you want to place infected patients with high transmissibility rates less than 20 meters away from some residential areas. What do you want us, the common folk, to do?
The next video that we will show you is from an isolation center. There are hundreds of people crammed into quarantine facilities. They are separated by less than an arm's length. For the last few days, Shanghai's COVID cases have floated around the 20,000 mark. This is no small number, and with China's strict COVID policy, every person is to be isolated in a state-run setup. There is no home isolation, and in view of the Shanghai outbreak, many diplomatic missions have also issued guidelines for their staff. The United States has urged its non-essential staff at the Shanghai consulate to leave the city. The Indian consulate in Shanghai was also announced inaccessible in person on Thursday. The statement issued say that the consulate will not be in position to provide consular services in person, but will remain operational in remote mode. Well, for more insight on this story, journalist Peter Catterall is joining us live from Beijing. Hello, Peter, and welcome to WION. Around 20 million residents are still confined to their homes or neighborhoods. Anger towards the government is brewing. What's the latest in regards to the COVID situation in Shanghai?
this situation has been developing over the last really 6 weeks now. We first saw cases rise in Shanghai kind of in the beginning of March, and it got to a point where under China's zero COVID policy, right at the end of March, they imposed a two-part shutdown of the whole city, during which time residents were not allowed to go out. They had to remain in their homes. And although that policy was supposed to be lifted about a week ago, effectively residents are still not able to move freely within the city because the case numbers simply have not dropped to a point where the authorities would be willing to let some sense of normality return. So during this time, we've seen a kind of a breakdown of supply chains. China's become a very technologically advanced platform economy in the last couple of years, last decade. But these platforms that people depend on to order groceries and to really get services that they need to live their daily lives weren't able to cope with these lockdowns. And so you really had a mass scrambling for just basic food supplies for many people. And so this has caused local residents to turn to alternative methods for getting the things they need to live their lives. But it has been an extremely frustrating and just kind of helpless experience for Shanghai and its population of about 25 or 26 million people.
Peter, there have been concerns, especially after videos emerged of citizens clashing with hazmat-suited officials. Residents are still forbidden to leave the confines of their apartments or housing blocks for weeks and have been desperate for food and freedom. What is the government doing to address that?
Really, since the initial outbreak in Wuhan, China's been pursuing what they call dynamic zero COVID, which, in theory allows them to maintain, normality in your daily life. However, if cases arrive, then there are these really stringent measures that get put in place. I've experienced this when there are local outbreaks in the city that you're living in. Certain freedoms that you have are no longer available to you. And so in Shanghai, if you test positive for COVID, then you are obligated to go to a centralized quarantine facility. And in cases that people are unwilling to go, then they will come get you. There's other cases of clashes with police, which emerged today. In order to cope with the number of positive cases, authorities have been requiring more space to house them and more beds. And they have actually closed off the National Expo building, which is there in Shanghai for this purpose, which gives them an additional 50,000 beds. But they have also been designating some residential compounds as necessary for additional quarantine centers. And they've been asking the local residents to relocate during this time. And of course, the local people are not too thrilled with that idea. And there's been some pretty, remarkable videos being shared on domestic social media today showing these clashes, which again is not something that is commonly seen in China.
Finally, Peter, Shanghai's outbreak has not been effectively contained, like you mentioned there. But how is China going to deal with the economic fallout if this problem persists?
Shanghai is, by many measures, it's the world's largest port. You have a lot of major manufacturers that with operations in Shanghai. For example, Tesla, one of its biggest production sites is actually in Shanghai, and they have been shut down for several weeks now. It's very unclear when they're going to open up again. And also many major Chinese firms also rely on Shanghai, both for manufacturing, but also as a logistics hub for connecting China's economy with the wider worlds. Mostly the Shanghai port operations have remained, they've remained open because they've had the workers at the port work within this kind of closed loop quarantine system where they can stay there, they sleep on site, and they don't have exposure to outside, potential infecting people. But the biggest problem for logistics has been actually on the land side. So although the major international ships are coming in and delivering and collecting goods, the drivers of trucks they are required to have COVID tests within the last 24 hours. And that has just been really difficult to sustain. And so you have a lot of goods piling up in warehouses in Shanghai. And so that has caused some pretty major issues, which is going to no doubt have global ramifications. So in terms of the larger kind of economic outlook, this is going to definitely deliver a pretty significant dent in China's 2022 economic goals. Having your flagship, most cosmopolitan, most developed city shut down for upwards of a month is going to have a pretty significant impact.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.